The haunting tales of dark Shivering. Dark Shivering, the quaint village which lies between England and Wales, overflowing with ghost stories, and outnumbered by the dead. The haunted campground. Dark Shivering Campground now lies as an abandoned piece of land, where once there was a thriving business and many happy memories for children to be made. The ground is a mile into the woods, but the only traffic the track sees now is dog walkers, walking their dogs. Back in its heyday, there were 6 long prefabricated buildings set around a well-maintained field. 2 buildings on the right were the girls' dormitory, and the 2 on the left were the boys'. The field in the center was used for ball games in the summer. And in the very center was a fire pit that the children had to avoid whilst playing football. Someone had painted the prefab dorm rooms outside walls to resemble log cabins, which as a child looked amazing, but if you visit now you can see the remnants of some badly painted faux cabins. There was an ice cream fridge by the main hut that was full of raspberry ripple ice cream and apple cider lollies. In the 60s, 70s and 80s saw the campsite's most popular days. School children would turn up every week on a coach to enjoy the countryside. It was an affordable way for children who lived in cities and towns to experience the great outdoors. It was an idyllic setting in the height of a warm summer. But in winter and at night it wasn't such a friendly place. Even the ice cream fridge seemed to make odd noises at night. As is usual at these kinds of places, children would tell each other ghost stories and begin to say they'd seen a ghost on the campground. No one really took much notice until a new camp leader, John Hawkins, took over in 1971. He was a natural information gatherer, and so 10 years later there was a whole shelf of books in his office describing ghostly encounters reported to him by children, staff and teachers. In the summer, John had 3 helpers who would assist in the day-to-day running of the camp. In the winter it was just himself and the couple who owned the campground. The wife would do the cooking and cleaning every day, whilst the husband turned his hand to anything. The couple had a house tucked away just beyond the camping ground. And John had a large room in the back of the main hut, behind his office. The ghostly incident books John kept were fascinating, and ranged from small bits of information like, small blonde girl insisted she saw a man outside the dormitory window, and the doorknob started rattling. The girl hid under the covers, to more elaborate stories covering a week's worth of ghostly events experienced by the visitors. One notable event from the summer of '75 was a particularly creepy tale. It actually began in 1967 when the camp owner's dog had died. Being a beloved and much-missed pet, the owner and his wife had their dog Barney buried in his favorite spot with a stone marker. Barney 1953 to 1967. It didn't take long for the children to find the marker and presume it to belong to some long-dead child who was killed at the camp in a horrific way. The children would dare each other at the stroke of midnight to run from their dorm rooms over to Barney's grave where they had to say a rhyme. Barney, Barney, you can't catch me, you are dead, under the tree. Then they had to count up to a minute, and finish with another rhyme. Chase me, until I get to bed. Catch me, then I will be dead. Inevitably the children would come screaming and running from the tree line over to the dorm rooms, waking some angry teachers up in the process. But in 1975, one brave boy had decided to do the midnight dare on his own, whilst his friends watched eagerly from their dorm room windows. The boy stood by Barney's grave alone, and began reciting the rhyme. He was feeling okay until he'd counted up to 60. He heard something moving in the trees behind him, and quickly started on the second rhyme. He was keen to start running as he could still hear something behind him in the woods. Just as the boy started running back towards the dorm, he felt as if something was chasing him from behind. The boys in the dorm began shouting at him to hurry up. He could hear panic in their voices, but he dare not turn around. He just kept running. As he approached the dormitory, the boys began screaming and moving back into the room, when finally one of the children shut and locked the door in sheer terror. Leaving the boy outside on his own, he smashed into the door and began kicking and screaming at them to let him in. But they were all hidden under their beds, too terrified to move. The boy felt like wetting himself. He turned around to face whatever was chasing him. Behind him, floating 4 feet off the ground, was a hooded figure. It growled loudly and came towards the boy. To his horror, the ghoul came up close to his face and began sniffing him as though it was a dog trying to understand what it was looking at. Suddenly, the thing stopped and shot back off towards the woods. Then the boy fainted. This incident was witnessed by 12 children and a teacher. John Hawkins had his own ghostly encounters, which seemed to always pick up pace in the winter, when the campsite was quiet and rarely housed schools of children. 1978 was a particularly cold and bleak winter for John. In fact, the whole of the country was in a deep freeze, and saw spells of snow that closed parts of Britain down. The campsite was no different. The owners were staying in London with their daughter, and John was alone from November 1978 until February 1979. He had his radio to listen to, plenty of food in storage, and could always find jobs to be done around the campsite. One night he was in his room tidying up after dinner. He listened to the radio as snow covered the campground. It was already 4 inches deep outside his door, with no sign of stopping. Completely shattering his peace was a loud knock at the door. This was very out of the ordinary, but maybe someone had walked off the public path and needed help, he thought. John headed to the front door and opened it, expecting to find a lost rambler. Instead, he was faced with silent snowfall. He called out, but there was no reply. Everywhere was white and silent. John didn't quite know what to think. He looked at the ground and could see no footprints anywhere, in any direction. A chill ran up his spine. Maybe he imagined it, he thought. With nothing to see, he closed the hut back up and carried on with his evening. Later, as he sat reading a book and nodding off, his radio suddenly turned to static. As he looked up, through the window he saw a large hooded figure glide past. He jumped up and went to the window to see what it was. And in the snowy silence he saw a dark shrouded figure glide out across the campground and head into the forest. John was scared, but also stuck in the middle of the woods in a snowstorm. There would be no help coming. A regular occurrence in the books was from the girls' dorm room. They would be awoken in the night by the showers starting up in the bathroom. After investigating and finding no one there, the girls would go back to bed, only to be awoken later by an old woman leaving the bathroom and walking out of the main door. This was the normal routine for this particular ghost, except for one time that she interacted with one of the girls in bed. The shower had come on as usual, and woken some of the girls up. They checked in the bathroom and found no reason for the shower to be on, and so went back to bed. One of the girls couldn't get back off to sleep, and so sat up in her bed reading a book by torchlight. Suddenly, the old woman came out from the bathroom, startling the little girl as she lay in her bed. The girl watched as the old woman came down the center of the dorm and headed for the door. Just as she was going to leave the room, she turned as if she'd just noticed the torchlight on, and slowly moved back towards the little girl's bed. She looked at the girl and headed towards her. The girl stared in horror as the woman stopped at the end of her bed. The woman's face was old and haggard. She looked at the little girl, and raised her finger to her lips and made a shushing noise. Then turned back to the door and left before the little girl started screaming. The campground fell into disrepair and closed in the early 90s. I was kindly given the collection of ghost books that John Hawkins had meticulously kept over the years. of course. I'll be sharing them with my paranuts in good time. Please take a second to like and subscribe to my channel. It's easy to do and means we can grow this paranormal channel together. Thanks for watching.